Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Betty Eats podcast, where we talk about real recipes created by real people, and we will learn how to tell good recipes from not so good ones. And today on the program, we have Maggie Hoffman. Maggie's career, I'm just going to read this, Maggie, because it's like spanned the world of food and beverage. I mean, I'm reading about you've written for Food and Wine, Bon Appetit. You were senior editor at Serious Eats, managing editor at Epicurious. Oh my gosh, you now also have a podcast of your own and a newsletter called The Dinner Plan. I subscribe to this and I love it. It is definitely a resource for people who struggle with kitchen burnout and what am I going to make for dinner? It's 5 o'clock. We all struggle with that. So I really love that. So welcome. And you do other things too, and we're going to talk about that. So welcome to the program, Maggie.
Thank
I'm
you so much. Yeah,
super excited to talk to you.
it's a long story when you look back from the beginning.
Oh, well, I'm excited to hear that. Now, something I am going to start with this because I was really surprised. I did not know that you had written not one, but two cocktail books.
hmm
Be still, my heart. I was like, I don't need these questions. We're just going to talk about cocktails today.
Love it.
Did you start out in the beverage industry?
Well, not exactly. Let me tell you the whole story.
Okay, let's hear
Uh,
it.
so After college, I worked in publishing briefly. I had a poetry professor in college who helped me get an internship right out of school. And I always thought he hated me, but in fact, he sort of started my career. Wonderful poet named C.K. Williams. And so I started out in publishing and quickly realized I wanted to do something more creative and started a food blog. I think it was late 2007. And, it was mostly just sort of to tell my mom what I was cooking. And she was across the country. I grew up in Oregon, so I was in New York. She was in Oregon. It was far away, and I'm sure five other people read the food blog. Uh, I quickly realized I was working in the design department at St. Martin's Press, and realized I was not a great designer. But I wanted to do something creative, and so I started pitching Serious Eats as a freelancer. And my first position for them was as a columnist writing about beer. And I was paid $25 a story. And every week I would try like all the brown ales or all the IPAs or whatever. I mean, I think we split IPAs into like four articles. And, my qualification was that beer was really exciting at that moment. And I was from the Pacific Northwest. And that was
Okay,
it.
that's a good reason.
I loved working with them and everything they were doing was so cool. It was really early on. And I convinced them to bring me on full time. I think it was 2010. It was a very small group, and Kenji Lopezal and I started on the same day full time.
Oh my gosh.
And so we walked into that office and there had been, I forget, like five editors. And then all of a sudden there were seven of us, or if there were four and with seven or whatever it was. And what we did in those early years, it was so experimental. I started a drink section for the site. And we had some really great writers who knew so much more than I did. Paul Clark and Michael Deach, who wrote Shrubs, different people contributing. But I was in the office, and so I would, make the drinks, and we would photograph them in the corner of the office, which is this sort of wonky setup. And I was there a long time and ended up becoming the managing editor. Uh, and we moved to California for my husband's job, and I did it from there for a minute, had a child, and, sort of realized I needed a little more flexibility. And that is when I went freelance and I wrote two cocktail books for 10 Speed Press. Um, the first one, the one bottle cocktail, is all about like drinks you can make if you only have a single thing from the liquor store, a single bottle of gin or rum or something like that, and everything else is just your regular groceries. And the second one is for entertaining. It's called Batch Cocktails. Um, and so, yeah, I had really focused in those years mostly on the drink side of it all. And I started to really miss both the food side of it and editing in general. And there's so many great writers out there. But I think editing is sort of a more specific skill set, and that's really where I was having fun. And I was also at the time freelancing for the San Francisco Chronicle, reviewing bars. So we would go to several bars a week, and I was writing these essays about the bars. But when I was on book tour for Batch Cocktails, we came back to New York, where we had been for those early years. And I just thought, what if we came back? And we just decided to do it. And so then I was at IACP, which is a conference for food professionals, that spring, and met David Tamarkin, who was running Epicurious at the time, and he was looking to hire a senior editor. And I said, well, I've done that before. And so I ended up joining the team at Epicurious as senior editor. And then when David left, David's at King Arthur Baking. When he left, I took over as digital director there. So I was there 4 years, which was really amazing. And then left and went out on my own to do this project. So the dinner plan launched in fall 2024. And that's my full-time gig now.
That's amazing. I love that. Now, something that you said just kind of went into my brain that I think is super interesting is you connected at a conference with someone. And, and I think, gosh, with COVID and all of this stuff, like some things like that have gone away. But I think, wow, that's really missing, I think sometimes is, like I haven't gone to any food conferences. I've looked at them. I've obsessed about them. I thought, oh, should I go? And I hear stories like this and I think there is no replacing that one-on-one connection of meeting face to face and just, that moment of fate, I guess, but it also just kind of clicking with somebody. And so I love that story. And it kind of
I
makes
have
me
so
think,
many of those stories, like not just the job, but real friends
yes,
that,
yeah.
were on a tour in one of those conferences or just happened to have lunch together or a meal together. And that's so valuable, especially if you work on your own and don't have the team to strategize together and that kind of thing. Oh, yeah.
hmm Yeah, yeah, that is so interesting. Well, I love that you got to also review bars. Like, what a fun job that is.
It really was. It really was.
Well, so back to food though. Did you grow up kind of cooking and like at your mom's elbow and or not really? Sometimes people don't. Like I didn't, but now I obsess about it. But other people I think have that tradition with their family or somebody, from their
Yeah.
childhood.
My mother was a wonderful cook, and also I think it took me some amount of time after leaving Oregon to realize how intensely flavorful the ingredients she was starting with were. That lettuces actually taste like something and berries actually taste like something. And so, yes, she was a fabulous, fabulous cook. And also, it was a great place to cook.
hmm hmm Yeah. Yeah, my husband is also from Oregon, actually, and so
Oh,
he's kind of a berry snob. I mean, I'll buy
wow.
berries from the store, and he's like, "These are just
No.
not it." And most fruits, actually, like his mom still lives there, and she grows apples and just plums, and you're right, like you taste those, and they actually taste like what they're supposed to taste like, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it makes a big difference when you're starting with quality ingredients and
Hmm.
homegrown things, and
But
so.
I do think the tradition, it is that the telling my mom what I was cooking, she would tell me what she was cooking. That was the same thing
Mm,
she with her mother. They would talk about what they were cooking,
mm.
her aunt. And so there's a little family cookbook that I guess my great grandmother made with her close
Oh,
family
oh,
friend that had all these cute little illustrations in it and sort of lovely. So I mean, cooking has always been a huge part of um, my identity.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So that makes sense then for you to start the dinner plan. And I love the interviews that you have with cookbook authors. And I also love that you were so generous that there is a cookbook giveaway every single episode, which is amazing to me. I'm fortunate enough to have won one, it was like Christmas in the mail. I was like, oh my gosh, happy Hanukkah to me. I was so excited to get this in the mail, so yeah.
It's so fun. I mean, not to encourage anyone else to be in the situation I am, which is just bookshelves that are groaning under the weight. It's really a problem. But I love cookbooks. And I remember the first day that I walked into Epicurious, it's a big open plan office, and just each person's desk had a pile of the books that were new to look through. And then people would be like, oh, do you have this? Do you have that? And of course, it's changed a little bit. Now pretty often, like the publishers will send out a PDF, but there's nothing as inspiring as turning the pages of a real book and seeing the photography in print. And it's one of those really beautiful things in life. And I have basically built a life where I could just have a mountain of cookbooks.
That's amazing. I know I want to say it's Carrie Faber. She's part of the Food Stack Library. So Lynn recently did an interview with her and showed her shelf. She also is groaning under the weight of cookbooks, but she has them color coded by a spine. It's gorgeous. I was so lustful after this beautiful display of books, and I thought, okay, I'm going to get organized one day and maybe do that. Maybe
one day. I'm going to do my pantry first, I think.
Yeah. Oh, well, so this is great. Speaking of pantry, I know that one of the things with the dinner plan is pantry ingredients, and how you have people call in and say, this is what's in my pantry. And then you come up with, or your guest comes up with, like a meal from these pantry ingredients.
Yeah, at the end of every show, we have a little clip. Everyone should call in. And people say, oh, I have this in my freezer, or maybe I have these. We had a recent one where she had a CSA that they just never got around to eating the root vegetables. So it was really time. And it's so fun. So every week I have a different cookbook author on the show, and, they're from different cooking traditions, and some of them have been chefs, and some of them, all different sort of points of view. And I'll always have an idea in my head, but they always surprise me. What they come up with always surprises me, and that's such a delight. So it's sort of the beginning and end of the show. So at the beginning of the show, I always like to hear about what they are cooking at the moment, and what they're excited about eating, but also just what do they eat in real life. I feel like a cookbook is such a polished thing, and it also takes such a long time to produce that it can be really fun, by the time it finally comes out, to talk to this person and say, okay, but what do you eat on a Tuesday? Yes,
because it could be very different from what they've been making for their shoot. And yeah. That's super fun.
So, I mean, the show, there's so many cooking shows, there's so many great food podcasts. And, I think a lot about the weeknight dinner problem, and there are a number of shows that are really about cooking for kids, which is not what I wanted to do. I really have been thinking a lot about what it means to have cooking be a part of your life that you love. And of course that ebbs and flows, but how you sort of take care of that part of your life. How do you feel inspired? How do you deal with burnout? How do you find ideas? How do you make that life easier? How do you make that more fun and more joyful? And everybody's take on it is different. I was talking to Melissa Clark from the New York Times, and I don't know if you heard this part, but I said, sort of, what makes you happy in the kitchen? And she said, well, what we do is when I'm cooking, her husband comes in and reads to her.
I did see that. Yeah.
And that just floored me. They read the Iliad and they read the Odyssey, and her teenage daughter is there too. And I would not want that, but I love it for her.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat too. I did read that, and I thought that was so interesting. And I think it kind of is different personalities, or just processing maybe, because I thought about, gosh, when I'm cooking, it's like, please everybody go away. Just leave me alone. But other people really love to cook together with
Hmm.
their spouse or a friend, and the thought of that just
Yeah.
gives me anxiety. I'm like, no.
And I think it's really important to be in tune with that. Like, here's this
Mm,
thing you have to eat.
hmm.
You don't actually have to cook, though I think most of us who are going to listen to a podcast about cooking really want to cook. And it's sort of tapping into what will make this experience be a joyful part of my life.
Mm, yeah, yeah, that's true, and that does bring some people joy, like you said, which is yeah,
But for some people, it's quiet
yeah.
time,
I
and
need my alone time.
yeah, for sure.
Oh, now, so kind of switching gears as because you've worked as an editor, you've seen a lot of food writing, I'm sure, good and bad, and you've seen a lot of recipes, good and bad. Um, and I know you're aware of this rise of kind of AI created recipes. Gosh, I saw it just the other day on a Facebook post that a friend of mine shared. I'm like, why, girl, are you sharing that? Um, Untested, just chat GBT recipes, basically. And so when you're reading through, how do you recommend that people sort of vet a recipe when you're reading it? Like, what are you looking for, thinking, yeah, that'll work, or yeah, that's not going to work?
I mean, I think if we're looking for good recipes, first you have to define, like, what do you mean by good? And I
Ah,
think there's sort of two parts of it, right? Okay, so the first part is, as you mentioned, I'm an editor. I've been an editor for a long, long time. Editing, unfortunately, is a career that is shrinking. There are fewer and fewer editors. And, we've created all these kinds of really exciting media that don't involve editors. I love Substack, but my assumption is that recipes on Substack have been tested by the person who's writing them at maximum. And that's not what you're paying for when you pay for a magazine with a staff. So just like setting that out, I think the first thing about what makes a recipe good is sort of the mechanics of it all. The question of, is it going to work? And that is the kind of thing where if you have a second reader, if you have a second tester, they're going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to ask, make sure it has an oven temperature, make sure that the descriptions include visual cues. So you're not saying cook this for 4 minutes. You're saying cook until what do you see happening? What can you notice? Because 4 minutes on one stove and 4 minutes on another stove are not going to match. So you need to have that like very complete illustration and visual cues separate from any sort of timing. And, does it mention if you're cooking something covered or uncovered? Are the ingredients listed in the order that they're used? And is everything accounted for? Are there ingredients mentioned in the step that aren't in the ingredients list? Does the timing feel reasonable? I mean, we always joke about the onions and whatever, but, I think really there's sort of different degrees of this, and a lot of it could be solved by editors, but paying editors takes money. And even, I think people who have been trained, whether it's culinary school or working in food media, will know to do some of these things. And then some of the things also are, a matter of style and opinion. So, in one place, it may be standard to include an internal temperature on whatever you're cooking. And I love that. I want to know the internal temperature. In other places, that's just not the style. And of course, style in recipes has changed over time. So that's one part. A good recipe, ideally for me, would have all of those things, the mechanics, so it works. But second for me, and I think it's something I think about a lot, both as a person who really knows how to cook and someone who reads a lot of recipes, is that a recipe beyond just like technically achieving the thing, for me to actually think it's good, I want to learn something. And I want a flavor combination I haven't tried, or, a traditional dish that transports me somewhere or has me tasting something I haven't had before or recalls something I have had before. Or maybe it's an ingredient that's used in a way that I haven't used it before. And, I think the internet was really shaped by SEO, by search, and that made a lot of recipes become exactly the same. Because trying to get to the top of the ranking, basically they had to be the same. And one of the beauties, there's sort of pros and cons of this sort of growth of all different sorts of independent media. One of the beauties of Substack is that it's not shaped by search. People are just publishing what they want to publish, and they're publishing what they think people are going to be interested in. And I think that does open the door to things that are more unusual, more interesting, more experimental, that part of it. I was thinking about Calvin Eng's book that just came out, Salt, Sugar, MSG, has a salad dressing in which he uses, you can get like a jar or container of pre-fried crispy garlic or crispy shallots or any of those things. And he takes that crispy garlic, which is usually just like a garnish on things that's crispy, and he blends it in to a salad dressing so that the caramelized flavors, those golden, crispy, fried flavors, go into the dressing. And you don't have to fry garlic yourself. You're going to burn it. You're going to, it's going to be over, under, all those things. This exists in a jar, and he just blends it in. And for me, it's like, wow, that is a great recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Because it had something that I hadn't seen. And of course, recipes that teach the fundamentals can also be truly great recipes. But personally, what I'm looking for is something that, these friends in food media often, when we were all still working staff jobs, would be like, oh man, I just cannot get excited about Thanksgiving again. I just can't do it. I cannot care about a turkey again, right? And I think even if you don't work in food media, even if you don't think about dinner 8 hours a day, if you cook dinner for yourself or a partner or a family, there is a sort of sameness to things that can be hard to break out of.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Yes, I can so relate to that because I kind of have this love-hate relationship with Thanksgiving. Early on, when I was first married and we started having kids, I would be like, ooh, let's do something different on Thanksgiving. And I just remember my husband going, you have 364 other days to do that. Can we just have like a normal Thanksgiving? Like we're all looking forward to like the regular dishes. And so I kind of had to give on that, but I still do like one crazy side dish or one something weird and different because, like you said, that it can just be so same. And I think especially for people who cook regularly, you get bored of the same. And I don't know, like some people are like, no, it's got to be meatloaf every Monday. I'm like, oh, kill me now. Like that's terrible. I don't want that. I can't do that. But So how do you do this at home? You're cooking weekly, daily. How do you keep that interest and excitement for yourself? Because I don't know, maybe your family is the same way. They're like, Mom, can we just have canned green beans?
It ebbs and flows. There are times where I try to cook something from each book that I'm interviewing the person. I want to get a sense of their flavors. I want to get a sense of, what they're communicating. And so I do try to do that. And mostly for me, there are times where I'll get really ambitious in terms of planning a week, but I actually think for me, what works best is sort of a mini plan. And so I will start to think, usually over the weekend, I will start to think about 3 things I want to cook in the next week. And it
Mm.
might be that those things happen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It might be that Tuesday there are a lot of leftovers. So really that one happens on Thursday. And so 3 things is about enough that it feels like I'm not just frantically showing up at 5 p.m., but also have a little bit of flexibility based on what's in my fridge and what everyone's feeling like and whether the construction crew cut the internet cord to our house. But I think a lot about this because I think it's going to be different for everyone, depending on where they are in their life at that moment.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think too, I've noticed for me as I get older and kids are growing up, and sometimes they're here and sometimes they're not. It's kind of like, how many people am I feeding tonight?
Yeah.
And do I want leftovers, and how much leftovers do I want? And
Yeah. I mean, it's
so,
something I love to ask different people because, some will say, I need to plan it all out.
mm,
I had a guest, Jenna Hamshaw, who has a new book, A Grain, a Green, a Bean. And that's this very sort of like great formula for creating plant-based meals. And she's really busy. She works in a hospital. And so for her, like, there really needs to be a system. And she kind of said to me, look, like where I am in my life right now, the system makes sure that I get to eat home cooked food. And I'm not always having fun and I'm not always feeling inspired. And that's okay. What I want in the end is to eat home cooked food. And it's just like cleaning your house or anything else. You don't always want to do it, but you're happy with the result. And that's very different from someone who is really in a creative moment in their life and wants to be trying new things all the time and that kind of thing. The other thing that was so smart about Jenna's system, and it's worth listening to her talk about it, but she cooks on Sundays for a couple of different dishes and puts some of the servings in her freezer. She then eats the things she's prepared, a couple different dishes or things to make, bowls or salads or whatever it is. She cooks those things on the weekend and eats them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and freezes the extra. And then on Thursday, what she's eating is something else from the freezer. So she's packed in a rotation of dishes
oh,
where she's not eating the same thing all week
I see.
because her freezer stash is rotating. And she's actively, Thursday, Friday, she's eating what's in the freezer.
Oh, that's very smart, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very smart. Um, you touched on something that I think is very interesting of sometimes you just need to be fed. You just, like not every meal has to be this like Instagram worthy, I gotta take a picture of this. Like sometimes you just want to eat and it might be ugly, but it's like nourishing and it's like this
Mm-hmm.
hits the spot
Mm-hmm.
tonight. And
Yeah.
do you feel like sometimes when people are cooking for themselves, especially if they don't cook regularly, they think this has got to be like the perfect meal. This has to be beautiful and it has to look just like that picture. Do you
Mm.
think sometimes people fall into that trap?
I mean, social media certainly doesn't help, right?
Mm.
But ultimately, sometimes that can be the joy of it. When we were, in the early days of the pandemic, one of the things I started doing was sort of like arranging these little fruit bowls for my daughter. And I did kind of just get into like the color of it. I have this beautiful blue East Fork bowl and I have these orange, cara pink oranges, and that can also feel good. I mean, I think if cooking is your creative outlet, there's nothing wrong with finding pleasure in that, right? And like, I was talking to Hetty McKinnon and she obviously, is working in food and people who work in food schedule is different. But she was like, if you can give yourself the extra 15 minutes and have this be something that feels nourishing, like this doesn't have to be, this is sort of the other side of the coin here. This doesn't have to be a duty that you hate. If you
Mm.
give yourself, could you find 15 more minutes and then have it be something that feels like, the way you would feel if you were going to do some watercolor painting or whatever it is, the other part of it. I don't know. It's a mix. And I think we have to tune into like, what are we craving? What do we need to eat? Like sometimes my family just, we'll just be like, we just need a really big salad and we'll make a really big salad and it's not anything following a recipe, and it's just the thing that we need to eat.
Hmm. Yeah, kind of listening to your body of like,
Hmm.
yeah, there are
And
days
sometimes
when,
it's nachos.
yeah. Nachos and a beer. That sounds amazing.
Sometimes that's it. You need to, and there's so many different forms of that. Like, what if you were on a picnic? What would you eat? Well, maybe that could be your dinner. Just sort of breaking out of the doldrums of the routine sometimes involves sort of imagining a different setting, or what if you were gonna eat dinner on your coffee table? Like, maybe that's not your normal thing. Would you make a bunch of dips, or would you get a bunch of fun stuff from a store to make a little picnic, and just let yourself change something.
Hmm. That's fun. I know lockdown was such a strange time, but it was also, I think, a very out of the box thinking kind of time, like you were talking about. And I know that, so one of our things during lockdown was we obviously couldn't do a lot of traveling and we loved to travel. So I thought, okay, well, we're going to eat the cuisine of wherever it is we would love to travel. So it was like, oh, we're doing German night or we're doing, Hawaiian night or whatever. And I think it, like you said, that is really fun to just sort of think, what would I eat if I was on a trip there? And let's go there in our minds anyway, and just to break out of the normal same. Yeah, that's fun. Well, you kind of touched on this where you have the dinner plan, but you also have some other newsletters as well.
It's
So
true.
let's
Yeah.
talk about
So the way
those.
that it works is that the Dinner Plan podcast is every week, and I talk to a different cookbook author every week. And then the newsletter on Substack, which is free, has a recipe from that guest every week, or sometimes two. And we do give away a book. So that is my main project. And then I just have some things on the side for fun. And one of them is a cocktail newsletter called What to Drink. Sometimes we talk about wine and beer that I'm drinking. We've gotten really into non-alcoholic beer this year, so I've been sort of reviewing those. Sometimes I'll run a recipe. It's sporadic. It's not something I can keep up with weekly, but it is fun. So that's called What to Drink. And then my other little project is experimenting with a subscription that is paid. The dinner plan is free for listeners and readers. But my little experiment is called the Vintage Table. And it is a couple times a month. I've been doing it weekly, but the idea is it's a couple times a month. And it's just sharing the finds across the internet of vintage tableware. So whether that's like colorful dessert cups or cool glassware, vases for your table. I collect very strange silver forks. That is something that I've gotten really into over the years. There are so many forks that are meant for certain things, like lemon forks are really spiky. Sardine forks usually have like a lot of tines. And, bonbon spoons are these like crazy little spoons that would pick up a little mint or something.
Oh,
I
how
have some
interesting.
tongs that are claws. So I have always been hunting for these things. Of course, I cannot buy them all. So I pick a couple of sort of themes for the week and look and see what there is. Cake plates, all kinds of good stuff. And just share it. It's mostly from eBay or Etsy, though there are other places too. And it's just meant to be a place for collectors. The world is full of people collecting stuff. And, I actually first posted about it on Threads, which is a place that I haven't really had a lot of conversations. Like, it's just a little quiet over there for me. And all of a sudden I said, what do you collect? And all these people have these collections. Oh, I collect teapots. Oh, I collect colorful glass, and I have this rainbow on my wall. I mean, these are things that bring people so much joy. And, of course, the resale market has changed so much with eBay. And nothing beats going to a flea market and seeing stuff, or going to an estate sale. But it's really interesting to see what's on eBay when you know what you're searching for, whether it's a particular producer. I went down a rabbit hole of antique cast iron pans the other day, and oh boy, I'm in trouble.
Uh-oh. Well, I did mention to you before we started recording that I can't subscribe to that
It's too
newsletter
much. But
because
I think a
that would
lot
be
of
the ruin
people,
of me.
if you're downsizing, this could be something that you're giving up and somebody else is ready to have a dinner party. I mean, I just love at a dinner party to have, these weird forks and spoons out on the table.
Yeah,
And so that is the vintage table.
so
And it's
fun.
fun.
Yeah, it's fun too because I think it kind of reminds us of, well, it does remind us of another time and place in history and where maybe it was normal to have all these things on on your buffet or on your table and people
And to
use.
think that that little weird fork has been used for 100 years is
Yeah,
wild.
yeah.
My mother used to have a sort of small collection of tomato servers, which are like these sort of flat spoons, silver, or hers were silver plate, that are sort of pierced to let the juices through, right? So it's like a round, beautiful, round, flat spoon, basically. And she had some really cool ones. And so, yeah, there's just all kinds of delights. And the truth is, a lot of this stuff isn't that expensive.
Mm.
Especially silver plate, like, you have to be a little careful with it because it's just silver on top of something else, unlike sterling, which is more solid. And so, but the silver plate, I mean, you can buy some of these beautiful things for like $11. So
Don't
it's
tell
not
me that. No, I don't want to know
right.
that. Well, I want to ask you about tried and true recipes. I know usually everyone puts out a tried and true recipe for listeners. What have you chosen for your tried and true recipe or recipes?
Well, I'm going to give you a list. I try at least once a year to make a list of sort of my most cooked recipes and the ones that I really did do more than once. So I'll send you the link to that so you can include it, the most cooked from last year. And I was sort of looking at it and thinking, okay, how has this changed and how has it not changed? Because I am always cooking from the new cookbooks as well, and some of those things sneak into the regular rotation, and that's how like that book was worth it, right? So one of the things on my list that I'm actually like, sometimes I feel some embarrassment about is that we have been making a lot of turkey burgers, just so many turkey burgers, because there's this great recipe. And it was something that was in my mother's sort of binder of recipes where there had been an excerpt in a newspaper, and it was, and she had clipped it out and put it in their binder. And they made it for me, and then I started making it, and we make it every other week or so. It's from the America's Test Kitchen Ultimate Burger Book, and it's a turkey burger where you mix in, it has panko and mayonnaise. So it's almost like with a meatball where you have a panade that's like a soaked bread mixture. And so they're extremely moist because of that, which sounds kind of strange, but it's really good. And then it has some shredded cheese in it, which I usually do pepper jack in the blend. And they're just really flavorful. And then we pile them with toppings, like a caramelized onion, avocado, sometimes crunchy lettuce, all that stuff. And it's just fun and good. So I make that a lot. The other thing I make a lot is Zainab Issa, who has a new book called Third Culture Cooking, just out. She had a recipe that's in the book, but it's also on Bon Appetit for gochujang sesame noodles.
I'm
And
there. I'm there.
it's a sauce that's just so smart where, the tahini and gochujang together are sort of rich and nutty and spicy and creamy. And
Wow.
that sauce is just so good. And we usually add like a baked tofu, make some crispy tofu and add that to the noodles. And she is just a genius of flavor balance
Mm.
where you have this spicy sauce and then there's fresh basil at the end. So it has this freshness to it too. And she adds broccoli rabe. So it also has that like earthy greens. And that's just like a signature recipe of hers where the flavor is just so, so good. We make that all the time.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Really delicious. I really, speaking of her, I have it's a recipe that I make whenever I have preserved lemons. It's like a preserved lemon tea loaf. Over the top. So
Lovely.
Good. She is, I agree, a genius with flavors. And yeah.
And then the other recipe that I don't think is on last year's roundup, and I really got to call Julia, get her to help me, let me reprint it. Julia Turshen's latest book, What Goes With What, has a whole chapter on meatballs. And we eat a lot of ground turkey in our house, and she has the best turkey meatballs I've ever had. They're extremely simple. And again, it's with a gochujang sauce. And I think the sauce is literally just gochujang, maple syrup, and water. And the meatballs are super simple. You don't have to add, it has, I think, a little fish sauce and a little soy sauce, but it's very limited ingredients. You're not chopping a bunch of ginger or any of that stuff. It doesn't need it. You make these little meatballs, you bake them, and then in the last bit, you drizzle the sauce over. I think you put them back in the oven for a minute, and then you stir them through the sauce, and the sauce has thickened a little bit, and they get kind of glazed. And those are so good.
Those all sound so good. I could totally go for a plate of each one. It's so yummy. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, where is the best place for people to connect with you online? To follow you or to contact you?
Everywhere. Maggie J. Hoffman on Instagram. I love to chat with people there. I love to see what people are cooking. And I do always post a little clip from the show. The best thing is to go to wherever you listen to podcasts and hit follow on the dinner plan. You'll see it's like an orange logo. And that way you'll get the show every week, and that helps me grow as well, to grow those numbers. And I'm on Substack. You can find me, Maggie Hoffman. You can find the dinner plan and the vintage table and what to drink. And I love to see what people are cooking. And I usually post on Substack. It's fun. I usually post in the notes what I'm cooking that day. And so it's just a really casual, I tried for a bit to do like a weekly meal plan, but the truth is, I know that morning what I'm going to cook, and I'm putting them there. And so if you're just looking for a little bit of dinner inspiration, come on to the Substack app and subscribe, and you can see what I'm having for dinner.
That's so fun. Thank you. I will put links to all of that in the show notes so that people can find you. Thank you so much, Maggie, for being on today. It was really such a fun chat with you. Such a pleasure. And now I got to go
really
make those meatballs.
Exactly. Now you're having meatballs. This was really fun, Betty. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.